The following is a presentation of The Day.
Welcome to our debate for the Norwich Mayoral race. My name is Erica Moser, and I'm a reporter and member of the editorial board at The Day, moderating this debate in the absence of our recently retired editorial page editor, Paul Chaunier. Taking part in today's debate is the Republican candidate, Mayor Peter Nystrom, and his Democratic challenger, Mark Bettencourt, who serves as Norwich City Council President pro tempore. Under our debate format, the candidate responding to a question will have 1 minute to answer. The opponent gets 90 seconds to respond and rebut, and the candidate who originally took the question 30 seconds to sum up. Our timekeeper is Carlos Fearhen, Assistant Managing Editor for Audience Development at The Day, and he will hold up a sign alerting the candidates when they have 15 seconds remaining. We will alternate between which candidate answers each question first, and we will begin with 1 minute opening statements, starting with Mr. Bettencourt.
First, thank you for putting this on. I will say that Norwich, at this point in time, I believe is at a crossroads, and it's really where we're going to have to make a decision as to how we conduct business. Norwich, I believe, needs to be brought into the 21st century, and I'm uniquely suited, of the two of us, to do that. We need to have better communications with the public. Needs to be more customer service based, friendlier, let's just say, and more useful to the citizenry. If I think we failed to do that to a large extent, mainly by minimizing staffing and reducing morale. So those are the basis, I think, for moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Nystrom?
Thank you, and appreciate the opportunity as well to be here. I've enjoyed being mayor for the last 4 years. It's been a really different run than when I was mayor previously, back in 2010 to 2013. The challenges have been much greater. The needs of the people have expanded. And as a mayor, I've sought to address those in particular. Even simple things like putting food drives on, because we've had lots of people out of work. You know, where do they get their food? How do they feed their families? Really getting out into the grassroots, into the communities, and learning more and more about the individual family needs, because that's really what I think a mayor is required to do. You don't sit behind a desk, you don't run 2 meetings a month. You have to engage the community, you have to be there to listen to everybody, and I've been doing that faithfully for the last 4 years. I enjoy being with the public. I'm meeting hundreds of people every week, going door to door, and that's where it's the best.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our questions. The first question will first go to Mr. Bettencourt. You've both emphasized fiscal responsibility. What are some specific ideas you have, without using phrases like finding efficiencies, you have for areas where you would cut spending and or ways to increase revenue?
In my case, I think part of the issue is that we have to be, let's say, penny wise and not pound foolish, so, or we have been, penny wise and pound foolish. So what's happening is we've minimized staffing in some levels which actually produce revenues for the city of Norwich, and we have to take a look at those parts of the agencies that actually provide revenue to the city. So we start talking about planning and neighborhood services, zoning and blight enforcement, those kind of issues where not only do they, is potential straight revenue, but they increase the value of properties in the city, when properly applied. So those things need to happen. Right now they don't have the staff, and we have very minimum amounts of staffing in public works, and city streets aren't clean. Those need to change.
Mayor Nystrom, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Well, first I would say that in all of these questions, when it comes to who's paying the bill, we better remember the taxpayers. We have one of the highest mill rates in the state, quite frankly, a mill rate that went up over 50% in 2014 and 15 when I was not in office. I returned to office, and the voters spoke loud and clear. They were not happy with that mill rate increase. At the same time the mill rate was being increased, that percentage, the grand list was being devalued. The revaluation was adopted in 2014. So now people's investments are worth less, and they get hit overhead with over a 50-point increase in the mill rate over 2 years. That kind of shock caused them to say, we're done with a Democrat majority on the city council. And they were lost. they were running for election. This young man, my opponent, was one of those people tossed from office. They spoke loud and clear. They want people to save money. They want the city to not spend what it doesn't have because it's paid for by the public. It's true. Our public works took the highest cuts in reductions in staff. It's true. We've had resignations and people leave. We don't have a blight officer right now, but we will be filling that position. We're also filling a part-time blight officer and a part-time zoning officer because we want to make sure that the city is working efficiently and that the public's dollar is protected.
Mr. Bettencourt, your response?
Those positions obviously result under a Democratic majority. So we need to have those types of positions in order to improve the city of Norwich and make the city a better place to live, work, and play. If we don't do those things, if we don't spend a reasonable amount of money on those kind of improvements and prioritize that spending, then we'll be doomed to the same cycles that we've been experiencing for the past 50 years.
Thank you. Our second question first goes to Mayor Nystrom. Norwich has allocated more than $10 million of its $14 million American Rescue Plan funding. With another $14 million coming to the city next year, what specific ideas do you have for how the money should be spent?
Clearly, infrastructure. We clearly need to complete the upgrade of the dispatch and the radio programs throughout the city of Norwich. That's about $3 million. City manager will be proposing $1.7 million in the remaining funds for this first year going towards that purpose. As far as additional improvements here in the city, infrastructure needs to be addressed. When I was a state rep, I walked the properties along Holland Road where the flooding took place by Bacchus Hospital this year with then Jaulaya Corner. What came out of that was a retention pond being put in to help deal with the flooding issues. It's going to take a lot more than that. We need to upgrade all those lines where the floods go through, make sure they're not undersized. It's really important that we not allow that kind of flooding to take place. We're going to have to spend some monies to improve that and see that it doesn't repeat itself.
Mr. Bettencourt?
There are 3 areas in town that need attention, including the one the mayor just mentioned, but also East Town Street experienced flooding, and of course the area off of Case Street that experiences flooding on a regular basis. So those areas all need attention, either additional drainage or water management plans. So those we'll have to deal with. There may be some funds available for that, and I hope that's the case. Other than that, I want to continue and improve support for small business, especially the mom and pop places. So we did reserve money in this allocation for the for mom and pop places, which I own. My wife and I own one. So in Mystic. So I appreciate that, but also allows still for larger projects to be completed. So, and we've supported that as a Democratic council, and will continue to do so.
Mayor Nystrom?
First of all, the issues he's spoken of, there's been unanimous support of. No one has voted against any of these ideas. What I do object to is when issues are sprung on the public as well as sprung on elected officials and the city manager. Most recently, we saw amendments offered that were not delivered to the city clerk. They were delivered to the press, but not the elected officials or the city manager. If we're going to work cooperatively, disclosure is really important. They failed on that tremendously. But we all voted yes anyway, so why not be open?
Thank you. Our next question is first going to Mr. Bettencourt. We received a question from a reader critical of the city mask mandate, which was implemented on August 23rd. The city said at the time that it would be effective until this Friday. Do you support ending or extending this mandate, and why? And what kinds of guidance, data, or metrics do you think should guide future decisions on COVID mandates and restrictions?
I agree with the city manager's position on this. I don't think that's in dispute. So in this case, he wants to see a few weeks of declining numbers in infection rates before removing the mask mandate. The mask mandate, I'll say, in and of itself is kind of problematic and it's difficult to enforce. But above and beyond that, I believe that it is an important piece. And I mean, I've already gotten my booster, so I fully support vaccinations. I believe the mayor does too, but I'll let him say his piece. I think the city manager's on the right track. If we continue to decline, then by all means, and it's safe to do so, by all means remove the mandate. I'm done.
Mayor Nystrom, your response?
At the very beginning, we decided to not let politics govern public health. The city manager was, in fact, put in charge of these issues, and I support that decision from back then, and I do now. The mask mandate is there. It's the one tool we have to try to reduce the infection rate. That's all we really can do. You can't force people to get the vaccine, although I will say, and I'll advocate to the public right now, please get the vaccine. Our vaccine rates are too low, and that's one of the reasons we still have one of the highest infection rates here in the London County. I believe in science. Again, medicine should never be politicized. That's the worst thing we can do as a society. We've seen it at the national level, a little bit at the state, although most of the state has run pretty smoothly on this issue. It's medicine. It's what got us to where we are. Why do people come to this country? Because one thing is we have one of the best healthcare systems as well, and we shouldn't abandon that.
Mr. Bettencourt?
Like I said, I think we're in agreement here. So I will say that I work at the Pfizer site. I mean, Lord knows I believe in science. I believe in the work they do there. So, again, I would also encourage people to get vaccinated because it's the fastest way we have to get out of this mess.
Okay, thank you. The next question, we're starting with Mayor Nystrom. City taxpayer money and Norwich Public Utilities money is being used to study the feasibility of creating a second business park on former farmland in Ockham. Do you support the concept? And secondly, what do you think of the kinds of development that have occurred in the first business park?
Well, first of all, I'll take the latter part. The first business park ended up being a hodgepodge. It was originally an industrial site by site. It wasn't done all at once. The roads were added as the need grew. But then it was opened up to housing and other endeavors. This must be only light industrial and business jobs. That's what it's about. And I think it's progressing rather well. NPU funded it. The city has now taken over that role, and I think that's important. It's a partnership between the city, NPU, and NCDC. We need new, clean sites for jobs. I have to turn developers away when they call. Some of the buildings in the existing business park, they don't fit the business model of new industries today. The ceilings are too low, for example. The Light Lear building is being looked at as a manufacturing site again. I'm told Amazon looked at it, but they needed 60-foot ceilings. They couldn't use it. It's only 40. We need new areas, new locations. Our existing mills are all old and need cleanup. They're not going to do it there.
Thank you. Mr. Bettencourt?
The mayor's right on this account. I mean, I don't think that part is in dispute. The fact of the matter is businesses want a clean piece of land. It's much easier to build on a clean piece of land than it is to, say, renovate an existing structure. And the mayor's correct in that, they're looking for taller buildings, taller spaces, for manufacturing. 60 foot is accurate. Obviously, we don't have anything like that in inventory. All our manufacturing was based in the 60s and 70s, and those structures that are there now are mainly getting used largely as like warehousing spaces because that's all they're really suited for right now. So is it the best use of the properties? No, most of them are actually in use, but it's not an ideal use of property for economic development. So that means, we need to have, in order to be competitive, you have to have that clean piece of property. And that's why I think it is important to support the Business Park North concept and hopefully bring that to fruition.
Mayor Nystrom?
I would only add in that its location is principally a great one. It's between Boston and New York. I would also point out that the land values in Massachusetts are really pricing industry out of relocating there or expanding there. It's like an acre of land, I'm told, in some areas, Boston area is $1 million an acre. The price here will be much less. We own our own utilities. NPU is the best utility in New England, and we bring them to the table when we negotiate with new development.
Thank you. Our next question is starting with Mr. Bettencourt. With the legalization of recreational marijuana, cities and towns across Connecticut are grappling with whether and where they want cannabis establishments. In a recent referendum, Stonington residents voted against prohibiting cannabis establishments, while Preston put in place a moratorium. Other options would be for the city council to ban marijuana businesses citywide, ban them in certain areas, allow them, or do nothing. Which of these options do you support and why?
I think the cannabis business gives us some new opportunities for economic development and quite possibly the old business park. So that's where I would be looking to seat those types of businesses. So either in growth, and we had some interest when the medical marijuana licensing situation came up. And some of those sites were toured, and somebody was going to possibly use them if they could get a license, which they didn't happen to win, so it didn't work out that way. But some of those properties up there could possibly be suitable for that kind of business. So I support cannabis in the city of Norwich. I mean, people use it. I'm not, it's just the way it is. I don't personally, but I can't say I never did. I went to college. So I certainly would favor that as a piece of economic development.
Okay, Mayor Nystrom?
I've sat with our police chief. Police chief was very upset about the passage of the law, the way it was handled. He considers it to be discriminatory against the poorer towns where they have higher crime rates, and yet it's veiled as something to help them, to pay them back for all the loss that they've occurred because of crime and activities. I would not oppose manufacturing in Norwich at all, but I will absolutely oppose the retail sale of it on our streets. I'm not going to expose the youth of the city of Norwich to that. What I'm told by our police chief is out in Colorado, the illegal sales of marijuana do not disappear. In fact, it increases its frequency on your streets because they hide it within the legal sales. And I just do not want our youth subjected to that right now. The mind doesn't really develop fully till you're age 25, and exposing our community to that, and I still think it's a gateway drug, is not the right thing to do. Manufacturing, I will support. We get that opportunity. There's some revenue for the city. I will not support retail stores.
Mr. Bettencourt?
I think with proper regulation, and the real gateway drug is alcohol, in my opinion. So if you want to go there, but and that's obviously we know what prohibition did. The country has failed in its war on drugs. I'm not saying I want to legalize hard drugs. That's not the case. But certainly, I think restricted sale to adults for marijuana is certainly acceptable.
Thank you. Our next question, we're starting with Mayor Nystrom. It's been 8 months since consultants released a fire services study showing that Norwich has a, quote, heck of a lot more pieces of apparatus than larger cities. Already some key provisions have been put off or scrapped, notably hiring a fire services director and mandating reciprocal automatic response to fire calls. Other Connecticut cities and municipalities have been able to collaborate, but why is that not happening here?
First of all, I say there is collaboration. The fire departments and the city manager are meeting. They're achieving goals, including some of those outlined in the report. Number one issue was fix the dispatch, help with the radios. It wasn't hire a seventh fire chief. I'll use that term loosely because I'm not sure what the title would be. This has been a point of contention on the council floor. We have a unfunded position passed right now in the city of Norwich. Salary of $129,000, benefits will come in over $100,000. Person hasn't even been hired, and our new budget next year is already in the red, in my opinion. I think we have 6 very good chiefs. 3 of them are new within the last year and a half, and I think they should be given the opportunity to prove themselves. Putting in this 7th person really interrupts, in my opinion, even union contracts with Paid Central. They weren't supportive of it either, because when it came down to who makes the final choice on discipline, they said it would be the city manager in the end. Well, then why are we wasting the money if the city manager is going to make the final decision?
Mr. Bettencourt?
As some people know, I voted to rescind the ordinance, so that ordinance doesn't exist anymore. The position doesn't exist. So because basically the position wasn't funded, and it was really, unless the position's funded, it really doesn't matter. So I figure the next council is going to have to deal with this, and that's the truth. So if they, I wanted to give them the opportunity to address the issues. If they address the issues, I run a dispatch center. I have some idea how the system works or should work. In this case, it's a difficult, because you have 6 different fire departments, all with their own ideas about how things should work. They're all autonomous, and the problem is we're one city, and we need to start thinking like that. So that's the problem.
Okay. Mayor Nystrom?
I think one of the issues that needs to be talked about is the autonomy of these. Some of them are state chartered, some of them own their own properties. They spend about, I think we spend about $670,000 for the entire volunteer fire system across the city of Norwich. They cover 83% of the town. Can we improve cooperation? Absolutely. But all these chiefs are fully aware that this is a bone of contention with the council and the new council. It's not going away, and I expect that they'll address it properly.
Thank you. Our next question, we're starting with Mr. Bettencourt. This is something that both of you had touched on earlier in the debate, but Norwich residents dealt with costly damage from floods this summer in both their businesses and their homes. The frequency and severity of floods are only expected to get worse. How do you think the city of Norwich should plan for the impact of future floods, and how would you fund any investments?
As we talked about before, I think there are separate things we can do. I think water management is a problem. So right now, they refer to like our reservoirs and stuff as full pond, which means that basically at 100% capacity. So right now, if we get any severe weather, there's going to be overflow. The flooding on East Town Street, we've traced back pretty much to Fairview Reservoir, which basically overflows into a brook that runs down into that area, and it's unable to, when it's full like this, it's unable to contain. So right now, NPU is looking at the issue, and we'll see about maybe, is it wise to maybe take down the level of some of these so they have control over Fairview, and try to deal with issues like that where we can minimize the flooding itself and increase retention, the ability to retain water.
Thank you. Mayor Nystrom?
We need to rebuild the system that carries water from these high elevation points that causes the flooding. We do need to lower the levels of these non-used reservoirs that exist in Norwich, whether it's Fairview or Taftville. They're not in use anymore. And lowering those down could actually help forestall some of that impact of the floods that he talked about earlier. But we need to rebuild the system. We need to oversize it, in my opinion. If we're going to be facing 3 inches of rain an hour, which is what happened to us in that Storm Ida, not Henri, which had been a hurricane, we've got to prepare for that. So we need to oversize those issues, work with the hospital. We're doing a hydrology study. John's going to propose that as well. Includes from Kelly all the way over to the tech school. I propose that it continue all the way over to Washington Street Extension. I visited former Mayor Lathrop. His home was flooded out by water coming down on that other side of the hill. But it all originates from the highest point. And, it's our treasure, Mohegan Park. But it also can present itself very difficult times when water is the issue that it's delivering to us, just like when the dam broke in '63.
Mr. Bettencourt?
Yeah, so the only thing that's going to work is a multifaceted approach. One, you got to carry the water away, and you want to prevent the accumulation of water if you can. So both things have to happen, if you want to prevent what occurred during the storms. So that's what that's the methodology I'll support going forward, to take a multifaceted approach and try to actually deal with the issues and prevent the issue from occurring.
Thank you. Our next question, we're starting with Mayor Nystrom. Both of you sit on the Norwich Community Development Corporation Board of Directors. In light of the reliance of the city on NCDC for economic development and administering major city-funded programs, should the city require annual audits of NCDC finances and programs? How transparent, as our mayor, do you feel your development partner should be?
I would like to see that everything is transparent. I'm not against an audit at all. I do know that it's drawn down their payment quarterly, because the mayor has to sign that, release the funds. At the same time, they provide quarterly reports on what they're doing. Our new president, Kevin Brown, he's doing something called 15-5, and he's giving us much more detail, and I think that's encouraging. He has brought an expertise that we did not have there, and that's really important. Jason Vincent had other expertise that no one will ever have. We lost him back at the end of last year. But we're continuing a lot of the ideas and concepts and vision that Jason had, and I think NCDC is doing a good job. Can it be better? Absolutely. If it wants to be audited, our comptroller is certainly capable of doing that, and I would support that. And I personally think they are, watching as the monies are dispersed. But you want a formal audit? Good.
I think there's more involved in an audit than just the revenue that they're having taken in. So, which is certainly part of the equation. Part of the equation with NCDC is the results they're getting. So, the reports that they've given to the city are totally unaudited, and basically, in some cases, largely anecdotal. So, I prefer to deal in in hard numbers and in comparisons over time to see where they've actually made progress. In some cases, I'm reasonably sure there's been progress. In other cases, I'm pretty sure there hasn't been. I think the administration of the downtown bond program left something to be desired. In some cases, it worked. In other cases, it was abused. They're working on that now. I will tell you, Kevin Brown is working on that. So, but those things need to be addressed. We can't, we can't take. We have some tremendous opportunity in using ARP funds, and to give the city a new vibrancy, if you will, and in doing so, we have to make sure those funds are adequately dispersed and accounted for, and that their use is effective. If we don't do that, then we're largely just throwing money at an issue.
Thank you. Mayor Nystrom?
Well, first of all, as I said earlier, I would support something like that if you want full audits, just like the city, like NPU and so forth like that. Not against that at all. But I still have faith in the comptroller's office, and they keep a close watch on how the funds are used at NCDC. As far as the downtown bond program, yeah, some businesses fail, but that happens as it does in any case. Restaurants in particular, 95% of them don't make it. But we've also had success. We've got about 44 new small businesses down there.
Thank you. This question, we're starting with Mr. Bettencourt. Norwich has a referendum question on the ballot in November asking voters to bond the $145 million pension debt. Do you support the proposal? Why or why not?
I think this is another non-issue for us. So it's kind of embarrassing, but the fact
tell listeners more about the referendum. The wording is often
the fact of the matter is I believe it's a good idea. So basically takes the entire bonded and the entire indebtedness in our pension program and bond it, and that money is invested. And the fact of the matter that we will make money on revenue from that investment, and use that to largely pay off part of the bond, at least the interest on the bond, and actually be profitable. So, estimates run from $20 to $40 million. I usually say they use the number of $30 million, and I think it's a good idea, and I hope it is supported by the voters.
Mayor Nystrom?
Well, first of all, the details of this were really brought forth by our city's treasurer, who's a retired banker. He's very bright. Proof in that he's not running against anyone. Everybody recognizes his skill set. And it's true, we'll be taking the existing payments we make annually now, and instead of trying to catch up to an unfunded liability, we'll be paying down a fully funded pension program. That's protection for the employees. They have a pension right in their contracts. It's important that that be maintained. It's also protection for the taxpayers, because there'll be opportunities for that cost of that pension to drop. And even in negotiations that have already happened with this city manager, we've seen long-term savings proposed and accepted through collective bargaining, and that's important as well. So there's other ways to get savings. I can tell you how I'm going to vote. I don't believe I can advocate that others vote for it. I think once we voted on it, we were advised legally not to do that. So I'm going to tell you I'll be voting for the referendum question. I think it's important that we take control of these difficult issues. It will also save us money when it comes to borrowing. We've got a big school project coming up over the years. We'll have lower interest rates because we're taking this step.
Mr. Bettencourt?
He's absolutely right. In this case, like I said, we're pretty much in agreement on this. My case, one of my major concerns was I chair the school building committee, so I was worried about future bonding, and this will not impact that. At least I've been told. So I look forward to that.
Okay, all in agreement here. Next question for Mayor Nystrom. There are dozens of short-term rental properties in the city, and while they provide extra income for operators, the city has received complaints about noise, parties, parking, and more. What would you like to see for short-term rental regulations and enforcement?
First of all, they're illegal now. They're not permitted under any zone. The majority of them have been very quiet, have not impacted their neighborhoods. Some of them on Broadway, they're these old mansions. It is a way to recognize the ability to pay the high taxes on those properties, to maintain them. That's good for that neighborhood. It's good for the property values, that part of the city. What's bad is when you have bad people running programs like this and violating the zoning regulations, violating fire codes, public health codes, and that's what we have going on in this city. We are in court right now. We're working with the state's attorney out of Hartford County and in London County. We're on the court docket. It is our focus to have this person, and it's really one person principally, arrested and charged and shut down. And that's what has to happen. I've also asked that the police put no parking signs on, this case, Mediterranean Lane, and I am going to insist that that take place. They cannot abuse that neighborhood anymore.
Mr. Bettencourt?
I'll tell you that the short-term rental, the mayor is aware of this. So we have there's a draft ordinance out there that we have not yet brought to the council table. I anticipate that that's going to happen. But like he mentioned, this one person is abused the right. It's none of what they are doing is allowed under zoning. This person, I will tell you, was doing this stuff literally 6 years ago when I was off the council, when I was on the council before. And this is, I had 4 years there. I did not run for office, and I was out of office. And I said, I cannot believe that the city is still dealing with the same issue. The city needs to be more aggressive in its approach to dealing with these kind of issues. I think if they had more staff in planning and neighborhood services, they could do better follow-up and make sure that some of this stuff is pursued, because I don't think it's happening well enough right now. Like I said, it's been literally 7 years, I think, since this has been going on, and it's really kind of a failure that it's taken us this long to actually go to court to try and stop something that is so obviously not allowed by zoning. So I would certainly be much more aggressive in trying to deal with those kind of specific issues. And regulation is short. I don't have any problem with short-term rentals. I would regulate them, but that would be it. They're certainly welcome as a business opportunity.
Thank you. Mayor Nystrom?
He's speaking about one specific property, 270 Broadway. Same person who now operates 138 Mediterranean. That's where the bigger piles have happened recently. She actually came to agreement with the city to run a bed and breakfast at 270 Broadway all those years ago, and then she never lived up to it and started doing what she wanted to do anyway. And she needs to be shut down, locked up, and I'm going to say that again, locked up, and she should be fined for what happens. And the courts can allow and give the city that authority to fine her, and we need that.
Thank you. We have one more question before we get to closing statements. This one we're starting with Mr. Bettencourt, and this is based on a question we got from a reader. Mohegan Park has many trails conducive to family walks, but dogs are banned. Why are dogs banned, and would you support changing the policy? Why or why not?
A number of years ago, I was on the advisory board for Mohegan Park, and I did support removing the ban. The problem is, though, legitimately there is a problem with enforcement, because you need a leash law there, and enforcement is always problematic with people allowing their dogs to run and stuff. So I'm kind of of two minds on it, but I think if people are reasonable and curb their dogs and clean up after their dogs, then they should be allowed in the park, and it'd be worth reconsidering. So that was, I'm a dog lover. I know we both have dogs, so. And my family has a lot of dogs, so I would certainly like to. I would rather have that than not have that.
Mayor Nystrom?
I support opening the park to families with their pets. Long as they're leashed, long as they clean up, we can create and put the stations in place. We walk our dog in our neighborhood. We bring the bags. We pick up after our dog. As long as people can do that, I think that we should allow that to happen. There was an alderman years ago who was strongly against this. It was personal to him. He used to, as he retired from being at Montville High and NFA, he actually prepared and kept the trails open. He volunteered his time. Hundreds of hours a year he would do that. And so you got to appreciate the effort he put in. But he was always dead set against letting the pups up there. I think it's time we opened up the park to families and their pets, because that's what other towns do. We can manage it. Someone becomes a violator that's repetitive, maybe we throw some cameras up there and we can catch them doing it, not cleaning up, create a fine structure for someone who's going to abuse it and ruin it for others. But the rest of the park, it should be opened up for the public and the pets.
Thank you. Mr. Bettencourt?
No, like I said, I supported it in the past, and I would support it again in the future. So.
Okay. It's now time for our closing statements. You will have 1 minute each, starting with Mayor Nystrom.
One, I want to thank the London Day for providing this opportunity. I want to thank Mark, my political opponent and friend, for showing up. I appreciate him being here. I enjoy being the mayor of Norwich. I enjoy meeting with the citizens on a daily basis. I spend lots of time in the community. I don't sit in an office. I think a mayor has to have that ability to do that. You do that by being a full-time mayor. I am full-time. I intend to continue to do that. I did retire, as I promised, 4 years ago from UPS. Got to get the initials right here. But I think the big difference between him and I is he will spend more money, and that money belongs to the taxpayer. I have shown, and I've made it a point, to reduce the mill rate. He passed the largest mill rate increase in this city. 2 years later, we lowered it. It was lower in 17 than in 15. And I think that's important. That's a lesson. If you have enough Republicans on this council, we'll put what has to be done, and that's to keep the taxpayers at the table when you're negotiating a budget. I don't think his party ever does that.
Thank you. Mr. Bettencourt?
The problem with their rationale here is that they don't invest in the city. The city needs investment. In order to make money, you have to spend some money. And that's what it takes here in Norwich. We have to invest in the people here in Norwich, in the citizenry, in the housing, in a lot of different areas, in order to maintain any kind of growth. The grand list growth has lagged behind inflation in Norwich, and that's a problem. You can't keep doing that. You have no choice then but to raise taxes or cut services. So at some point you're going to have to start cutting police, fire, and that. If you keep doing that, there's no way around it. So we need growth, and we need to continue to be responsible in our leadership in the Democratic Party, which we have been the last 2 years. I think this has been a fairly conservative Democratic majority. We didn't raise taxes this year, or very little, a minute amount, and that's where we should be doing.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us here today for this debate. The election is on November 2nd, and to any of our people viewing this debate, either live or after the fact, you can follow the day's election coverage at theday.com/section/election2021. Thank you.